Hello and welcome to Farm Journal Live. I'm editor Clint Griffiths from our newsroom here in northern Indiana as we bring you the latest news happening across the agricultural industry. And we begin today with some breaking news. This just out from CNBC reporting right now that the chicken industry executives, including the CEOs of Pilgrim's Pride, they've been indicted for price fixing. The Wall Street Journal reporting a total of 4 industry executives indicted for allegedly conspiring to fix prices on chicken sold to restaurants and grocery stores. That indictment says that current and former senior executives at Pilgrim's Pride, Claxton Poultry Farms, fixed prices and allegedly rigged bids from 2012 to 2017. Tyson Foods, Pilgrim's Pride, and Sanderson Farm shares all dropping on the news right now. The companies all denying the accusations at this time. Now we're learning more about food prices and supply during COVID-19 outbreak. USDA reporting a surge in grocery store demand coupled with supply constraints did cause egg prices to more than triple in March, reaching an all-time high of $3.07 per dozen. April, the prices dropped. They fell back to $1.05 per dozen at the end of the month, suggesting that supply-demand imbalances have eased. Given the market disruptions, many ethanol producers are trying to make hand sanitizer, but there have been some issues. The FDA first allowing it, then making a change in guidance on the quality standards the sanitizer needed to meet. Ethanol industry leaders saying that requiring certification is cost prohibitive for most producers. Now FDA plans to allow more companies to make it, including ethanol producers, but that's because the demand for sanitizer outpacing supply right now. Geoff Cooper is the president and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association. Geoff, this new guidance coming back out, where does that put us now on this whole sanitizer thing?
Well, this is the 4th iteration of guidance from FDA, and the agency continues to move the goalposts. It is good to have finally some specific impurity limits, but because we were kind of flying blind before, but we're concerned that this new guidance is not going to do anything to alleviate the shortage in hand sanitizer because those limits remain too restrictive for most U.S. ethanol producers to meet.
And I saw you make some comments about kind of the standards, and you compared the standards to a couple of other liquids that are pretty common around the house.
That's right. The impurity that FDA appears to be most concerned about is called acetaldehyde.
Okay.
And that sounds like nasty stuff, but it's found in every glass of wine that you might consume. And in a typical glass of white wine, you might find 500 parts per million of this acetaldehyde impurity. So it's fine. It's approved by FDA for consumption, but they have limited acetaldehyde concentrations in hand sanitizer to 50 parts per million. So 8 or 10 times more restrictive than what you find in a typical glass of wine, and 20 times more restrictive than what the Canadian government allows in hand sanitizer produced in that country.
Geoff, how big of a market is this for our ethanol industry? Obviously, we've had some hiccups here on the fuel side, given the lockdown that we saw for about 6 to 8 weeks. Is this really a good bridge, and how big a market potential is it for us?
Well, it's a tiny market compared to the size and scale of the fuel market, obviously, but it's a high value market, okay. And so it's a much smaller volume, but the volumes are worth more. And so we did see a lot of ethanol producers trying to tap into that market when the fuel market took such a hit. And more than anything, the industry wanted to step forward and do what they could do to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Some companies were even donating the hand sanitizer or the alcohol they were making for hand sanitizer. So we were seeing it more as a way that our industry could contribute and help out during this crisis. More so than a long-lasting market opportunity for ethanol producers.
Yeah, interesting there. Talk a little bit about how the ethanol industry is doing now as we've seen some of the lockdown restrictions start to ease, more people moving about, maybe returning back to work or at least back out in the world and doing a little bit of shopping here and there. How have things changed in the last couple of weeks as far as outlooks go?
Yeah, things have changed. The ethanol industry is doing better, but it continues to struggle. We still have somewhere between 30 and 40% of our nation's production capacity offline. We still have more than 50 plants that are completely idle today. So yes, we are beginning to see some rebound in gasoline demand and ethanol consumption as people get back out on the roadways. But we're still about 27, 28% below year ago levels when it comes to ethanol production. And even with this recent rebound in gasoline demand, we're still about 20% below sort of normal consumption rates pre-COVID. So we've still got a ways to go before we expect to see all these plants come back online. But things are improving. We are beginning to see that light at the end of the tunnel. But the industry is still hurting, and recovering from the last 2 months that we've had is going to take more time and more help.
Yeah, obviously travel and getting people comfortable traveling and getting moving around the country is going to be a big part of that whole puzzle. Geoff, thank you so much for joining us here on Farm Journal Live and giving us an update on where the ethanol industry stands at this time. It was primary day at a number of states on Tuesday. In Iowa, State Senator Randy Feenstra defeated incumbent Representative Steve King in the Republican primary for Iowa's 4th Congressional District. King lost his seat on the House Ag Committee last year after alleged comments he made during an interview. The Des Moines Register said it was the first time in 120 years that an Iowan hadn't been a member of that House committee. Just in, private exporters reporting the USDA export sales of 186,000 metric tons of soybeans for delivery to unknown destinations. That comes a day after USDA confirmed a flash sale of 132,000 metric tons of soybeans to China, helping drive soybean prices 8 to 10 cents higher on Tuesday. The week started with reports that China might take a break from buying U.S. soybeans and pork. Summer weather, and let's talk a little bit about those markets before we move on to summer weather. We got Alan Brugler. Alan, thank you for joining us here on Farm Journal Live. What's your take on where we sit with some of these soybean markets as we get into this June, which is typically kind of this weather month?
Well, as you mentioned, that is a big variable weather. But what we see in the soybeans is demand is picking up. We've got Brazil has shipped out a tremendous volume of soybeans, particularly in April and May. Over half of their exportable supply is already gone. The Brazilian real is at the highest level against the dollar that it's been since back in early April. So the bottom line is U.S. is a lot more competitive right now to all destinations. And then we're starting to see the Chinese firms nibble here. The rumor early in the week about them restricting purchases was focused on the state-owned trading companies. It didn't affect any of the private companies that also import from the United States. And we are seeing some activity, as you mentioned, yesterday and again today.
Alan, we're celebrating Pork Week here with the Farm Journal folks. Talk to us about the pork and hog market right now and where that stands as we are here at the heart of grilling season.
Well, we had a tremendous shortage of pork as the plants were taken down due to COVID-19 problems. That boosted prices to the highest level that we've seen for pork since back in the the PED days. We've now come back closer to normal production. We're still down, and packing capacity is still not back to normal due to changes in line speed and plexiglass dividers and so forth. But I think what you're going to see is the wholesale price of pork and beef, for that matter, will come back down to earth here as supplies are normalized. We are going to see the CME lean hog index come down because of that, because a big piece of that index is, in fact, the pork value rather than the live hog value. That means hedges are probably going to work here, even though the cash hogs are pretty cheap here. Should see a little more support under the cash hogs as the packers get a little closer to caught up. Biggest problem we have right now is we've got a number of ready hogs out there and still no place to take them.
Do you think we'll see some long-term impacts here to the pork industry as far as inventory numbers as we move throughout, Q4 of this year into next year?
Yeah, in the cattle business, we've kind of just backed off the production. We've been able to slow down the rations, slow the placements, et cetera. That we've deferred the beef production. In the pork side of things, we're actually losing pork production because we've had to euthanize some piglets. We've had euthanized some fairly adult hogs that were ready for market or close to it. And so tonnage is going to just plain be down from the base case pre-COVID. That long-term is probably supportive to prices. I think you should not be surprised to see a slowdown in pork exports here because we just don't have enough pork to ship. If firms overseas have firm contracts, you'll see that stuff moving. But basically, the domestic market's going to absorb a lot of the pork production until we get a little closer to caught up on the production side.
All right, Alan, thank you so much for joining us here on Farm Journal Live. Really appreciate it. We'll be talking with you over the next few days here on Ag Day and have a few more conversations. Thanks so much. Summer weather has many chefs out firing up the grill. In honor of Pork Week, we're continuing to share some tips for cooking the perfect piece of pork. Here's Chef Jim Murray with the Pork Check-All.
Hi, I'm Jim Murray with the National Pork Board, and today we're going to smoke a boneless pork loin. What I've done is I've taken just plain kosher salt and liberally salted down the piece of meat the night before, put it on a rack in the refrigerator, unwrapped, and let it dry cure. Now what that does is it opens up the surface so it's much more accepting of the seasoning, and it kind of gets the seasoning down into the meat. So this is a boneless pork loin. Now, even though they call these barbecue rubs, there's really no reason to rub the meat with your seasoning. A simple, nice, liberal coating evenly across the meat is probably your best way to go. Both ends, and we're set for the smoker. Welcome to the smoker. We're going to be building a direct-indirect style of smoker here, meaning that we have our charcoal chimney ready to go on this side, and we have the vents open. On the opposite side, we have the vents open, and so we're going to create a flow of smoke across the meat once we put the grate in. So what we're going to do here is simply put our coals out for heat. So we've got the coals over here. We have 2 pieces of wood that we're going to position here just to start smoking and smoldering. We'll put the grate over. Now we're going to put our pork loin opposite where the heat is. So it will be cooking by the radiant heat of these coals and not create anything where it could flare up. Next, what we want to do is we want to know what temperature this is without having to open and close. We are going to position that right into the center of this roast, so it's at the thickest part. We're ready to go. The InstaRead thermometer reads 145 degrees, and for this particular cut, that's where you want to take it and give it about a 3-minute rest. With these particular size roasts, you can go upwards of 15 to 20 minutes rest, and it will be perfectly fine. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
All right, now it's time for lunch. Thank you all for joining us here on Farm Journal Live. You can continue to keep up to date with the latest coverage. You can go to agweb.com/coronavirus for our coronavirus impact coverage. Of course, anything else impacting the agricultural industry, just hit agweb.com. Thanks again for watching. I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great afternoon.
It started as social distancing, self-isolation, and caring for loved ones. A time for agriculture to be proud, to be essential. Now, it's changing. While states start to reopen and jobs resume, out here, the clouds are building. The path is uncertain. It's not the first time, it won't be the last. But we'll farm on. This soil is soaked in generations of sweat, of reinvention, of grit. Farm on is a calling. It's a mantra, a mindset. When the horizon dims and things turn dark, we'll find the light. We may be doing this for you, but we're also doing it for them. 2020, now's the time to farm on.